We're back with another episode of Unscathed, and as always, I'm going to be your host. Today, we are going to talk about emotional absence. Research indicates that a lack of emotional presence, that's emotional neglect, unavailability, or disconnection in African homes, is a significant, often underreported issue stemming from cultural norms, economic pressures, and historical factors. Studies highlight that while physical needs may be met, emotional nurturing is frequently neglected. So, if you take a look at the key statistics and findings on emotional absence, you would see that there is a high prevalence of emotional neglect or abuse. According to 2011 analysis of low-income and transitional countries, 83.2% of children in surveyed African countries experienced emotional abuse. In a study in South Africa found that over a third, that's 36.3% of children under 17, suffer from emotional abuse and neglect. In Nigeria, a 2014 study found emotional and psychological abuse to be present in 16.8% of adolescents with high rates of uninvolved parenting. While in Uganda, a 2019 study showed an 86.1% of students experiencing at least one form of emotional violence from parents in the past month. In line with this, there are key drivers of emotional unavailability, and I have summed them up to 3 key drivers. We have economic pressure, which is the need to prioritize physical survival, which often leads parents to focus more on financial provision rather than emotional engagement. The second is migration and work factors. So high rates of labor migration result in distant or absent parenting, reducing day-to-day emotional connection. And the third driver is the cultural definition of nurturing. So in some African contexts, caregiving is traditionally defined by protection, discipline, and provision rather than open verbal emotional expression. So for today's story, we are going to talk extensively about Chiamaka Okure. She is a person who experienced some level of emotional absence, and with her story, it's going to help us put a better context to what I'm trying to explain that emotional absence feels or looks like, and most of us might be able to relate to it if we're really raised by traditional African parents. And so while we listen, I do not want us to condemn ourselves for anything. I'd really love you to just reflect a bit. We're going to, some of us are already parents, while others haven't gotten to that stage yet. So in your place of reflection, I need you to pick out those areas where you feel your parents missed out on 1 or 2 emotional needs that you had, and make a note on the things that you would want to do for your own children so you are able to show up for them, and that's going to reduce the rate of depression and peer pressure in the lives of our children. Okay, so let's head into the story. My name is Chiamaka Okure. I was the first child in a family of 4. There is a big age gap between me and my brother, Obina. By the time he was born, I was already 7. By Nigerian standards, I was already a second mother. Our house was always busy. Generator humming in the evenings, radio playing Igbo high life in the kitchen, my mom shouting from the back,
Chiamaka, did you sweep the parlor?
My dad's voice booming from the sitting room, football commentary on DSTV. They were there, always there. In fact, that was the thing everyone pointed to whenever I tried to explain my childhood. They were present, they provided, they did not abandon you. And it was true. The house was never empty. There were always instructions, always errands, always chores waiting for me. Chiamaka, sweep the floor. Chiamaka, wash plates. Follow your uncle to the shop. Behave yourself. And the likes. I was expected to obey adults, uncles, aunties, neighbors, without question. My body had to respond quickly. My mouth had to stay respectful. My face had to look composed. But no one ever asked me any day, "How are you doing today?" It was assumed that if I woke up in the morning looking healthy and there was food in the house, then I was fine. No one asked if something bothered me. No one asked if I was scared, confused, or overwhelmed. No one asked if I had something I wanted to say. Anytime I tried to speak casually, just talk or just share your thoughts, I was shut down. "Children don't talk back. Why are you talking too much? Go and sit down." I wasn't allowed to just be a human being. Yes, I was a child. But to my African parents, that meant that my emotions were inconveniences. But I used to wonder, aren't children supposed to have feelings too? Aren't we allowed to be confused sometimes? Can't we share concerns when we have them? I learned very early that silence was safer, and that went on for as long as I can remember. Over time, silence didn't just become safety, it became an expectation. In our home, whenever something went wrong, eyes found me first. If a plate broke, "Chiamaka, what did you do?" If Obina cried, "Why didn't you watch him properly?" If my mom was stressed, tired, or overwhelmed, her frustration landed on me. There were days I was punished for things I genuinely did not understand. I remember standing there confused, being beaten, trying to replay the moment in my head. What exactly did I do wrong? Sometimes the punishment came even before my explanation. Sometimes there was no explanation at all. And so I stopped asking questions. I started assuming guilt. I started behaving like something about me was naturally wrong. And from there, the rest followed. The words, the comparisons, the accusations, the pressure to be more, to do more, to try harder. That was how I learned to earn love, not by being held, but by being useful. I don't remember the first time my mom called me irresponsible, but I just know that it became normal. If I forgot to do something small, maybe I swept but didn't arrange the chairs properly, she would sigh deeply. You know, that tired Nigerian sigh that already meant trouble. "You don't think? You lack common sense. Is this how people we are investing in will behave?" Those words entered me quietly. They didn't hurt initially or loudly. They settled. I started checking myself before doing anything, second guessing every decision, asking myself, is this sensible enough? My father's words were sharper. Whenever I came home late from school activities, or laughed too freely, or greeted a boy too comfortably, his eyes would narrow. "You think I don't know what you're doing outside? All these men you're following up and down." I wanted to shout, "I'm not doing anything wrong." But I didn't have the language for that yet. And so I did the only thing I knew how to do. I withdrew. I avoided boys completely, not because I did not like them, but because I wanted to prove something to my dad, that I was clean, disciplined, worthy. I grew up thinking femininity itself was suspicious. Report card days felt like standing trial. In school, people always celebrated me. Teachers would call my name, clap for me, write excellent at the top of my paper, my classmates would whisper, "You're so smart. Oh, how I wish I had your brain." But home was different. I remember one particular afternoon. I had just come back from school with my results tucked inside my bag. My heart was racing the whole way home. I had topped the class again. First position, neat handwriting, teacher's comments glowing. I rehearsed how I would present it. Maybe today they'll smile. Maybe today they'll say they are proud. I handed the paper to my father with both hands like an offering. He didn't even look at me. He adjusted his glasses, leaned back on the sofa and started scanning through the page slowly, too slowly, like he was searching for something wrong. My mom stood somewhere nearby with her arms folded and her expression was unreadable. The silence stretched. I started explaining. I started talking too fast. The teacher said the class average was low, but I did well. He cut me off with a small nod of annoyance. "Is this the best you can do?" I froze. He pointed at the average. "This average is not impressive. With the amount of money we're spending on your school, this is what you bring home?" My chest tightened. I tried to say something, anything, but my voice couldn't come out. And my mom added, "Don't let this get into your head. You're not the only child in the world." I wasn't asking to be the only child in the world. I just wanted to be their child. My father handed the paper back to me like a receipt. "You can do better. Don't relax." I nodded. I always nodded. I walked into my room with the paper in my hand, but it felt heavy, like it weighed more than all my books combined. I sat on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan. What is better than first? What exactly are they looking for? Is there a position higher than this? Another time I came home with second position. That day there was no silence, just disappointment that felt louder than shouting. "Second? What happened to first? Were you playing in class?" I wanted to say I tried. I wanted to say the subjects were harder. I wanted to say that I was tired. But I already knew the script. Explanations sounded like excuses in that house. And so I swallowed everything and promised myself that I would never come second again. That's how school stopped being about learning and started being about survival. I stopped enjoying success. I stopped celebrating wins. I started chasing an invisible line that kept moving. Even when I brought home the highest score, I waited for the but, and there was always a but. So I learned to fear satisfaction. I learned to fear rest. I learned to fear joy, because joy always felt like something could be taken away with one sentence. And the worst part, they probably thought they were motivating me. But what I always heard was, "You're never enough, not even when you're the best." That thought stayed with me for years. University was supposed to be like freedom to me. New city, new hostel, no one telling me when to sleep, when to eat, when to talk. And for the first time, the air was quiet in a way that wasn't suffocating. I remember my first week on campus. My roommate Ifunaya was loud, bubbly, always on a video call with her mom. She would lie on her bed and say things like, "Mommy, guess what happened today? Mommy, I miss you." I used to watch her like she was speaking in a foreign language, because calling home never crossed my mind unless I needed money or they called first. Not because I didn't love them, but because I didn't know what to say to them. What do you tell people who never asked you how you felt growing up? In class, I was still the quiet one. I sat in the front, took notes, knew the answers. But when the lecturer asked questions, my heart would race, my palms would sweat, my voice would shrink inside my chest. I always thought, what if I say something stupid? What if they think I'm not as smart as they think? So I kept quiet. After class, people would gather around me. Please explain what he meant. How did you solve number 3? And I would explain clearly, confidently, like I was born to teach. But inside the classroom, I was invisible by choice. Friendships were complicated. I had no idea how to just exist with people. I thought friendships had to be earned, negotiated, maintained with efforts, and so I overgave. I helped with assignments. I listened to everyone's problems. I lent money I couldn't afford to lose and never asked for it back. I stayed quiet when I was offended. Somewhere in my mind, love and friendship were like contracts. You prove your worth and maybe they keep you. I had no idea that people could just like you without you performing. And don't even let me talk about romance. Romantically, I was very distant. Guys would try to get close, but I kept emotional distance like a reflex. My father's voice lived rent-free in my head. You're frolicking around. So I overcorrected. I dressed down. I avoided attention. I avoided closeness. I didn't want to be misunderstood, and I didn't want to be judged. I didn't even want to be that girl they talked about in family meetings. Looking back, university didn't heal me. It just gave my wounds more space to breathe. I was independent, yes, but emotionally, I was still that child living under my parents' roof, who, whenever she tried to raise her hand to talk, slowly dropped it when nobody listened. Moving to Port Harcourt felt like starting life in lowercase. New city, new job, new apartment, but the same girl on the inside. I woke up, I went to work, I came back, I ate, I slept. No chaos, no drama, just everyday routine. The same routine I had perfected since university existed quietly. Do your work, don't take up space. At the office, that was where I met Bisola. Bisola worked in HR. She was always laughing, always walking to the office like she brought sunlight with her. She reminded me of my roommate Ifunaya in school. The same energy, the same curiosity about people. And she noticed me and always tried to have me around. She started small. Let's have lunch together. Why do you always eat alone? You're too serious, Chiamaka. You need to loosen up. I would smile, I would nod, make small talk. But I never really entered the conversation. I was present but not involved. The way I had to learn to be present at home. One weekend, she dragged me out. A cafe, then a book club meetup, then a birthday hangout. I tried. But while people laughed, I calculated. While they joked, I listened. While they connected, I stayed on the outside of myself. And Bisola noticed it. One evening, she looked at me and said, half joking, half serious, Chiamaka, you live like someone who is waiting for life to start. The real turning point for me, for my healing journey, came at a conference. Bisola insisted that we attend the event. hosted by a particular church. She always said that she loved the preacher's teachings. I wasn't particularly spiritual at that time. Church was something I grew up around, not something I felt deeply connected to. But I went. The hall was cold, bright lights. Worship music was playing softly, and the service started. And then the preacher started talking about dysfunctional homes. He spoke about homes where parents were physically present but emotionally absent. Homes where children grew up learning survival and not safety. Homes where love was performance-based and silence was mistaken for discipline. I felt like someone had opened a window into my childhood and started reading it out loud. My chest tightened. He said something like, "Trauma doesn't disappear when you leave the house. It becomes the software running your adult life." That's when I stopped writing. I just stared at the stage. It felt like someone had been describing me without even meeting me. That night I cried, but this time, the crying had words. I sat on my bed and whispered, so this wasn't just me being weak. This was trauma. The words felt heavy. They felt real, unavoidable. And for the first time, my past had a name. I wasn't a church person, not deeply, but something shifted after that event I attended with Bisola. I felt like there was something in faith that I had never touched. Something that wasn't about rules or attendance, but about healing. And so I started searching. I listened to messages on emotional intelligence, childhood wounds, identity, God's love. I bought books on confidence, boundaries, self-worth. I highlighted sentences that felt like they were written for me. Slowly, I started seeing cracks in the old narrative I had lived with. Bisola stayed with me. She didn't just drag me out socially. She asked me questions. She listened. She called me out gently. She would say things like, "You don't have to earn friendship. You're allowed to say no. You're not boring. You're just guarded." And for the first time in my entire life, it felt like friendship didn't need a performance on my part. I also started therapy. It was awkward at first, sitting in a quiet room with someone whose job was to ask me how I felt. I didn't even have the vocabulary for words beyond fine and tired. But session by session, I began to untangle memories I thought were normal. The therapist called them emotional neglect, and I called them childhood. We found a way to meet somewhere in the middle. Healing for me wasn't cinematic, and it didn't come quickly. Some days I felt powerful. Some days I felt like a confused child again. But I was finally on a journey, not just surviving, but unlearning, relearning, and becoming. Vulnerability felt terrifying, to be honest, but it also felt like oxygen. The changes didn't happen loudly. No one woke up one morning and said, "Chiamaka, you are healed." It was more like little glitches in the old version of me. I started talking more, not in a dramatic, extroverted way, just more honestly. In meetings, I raised my hand once in a while. My voice still shook, but it didn't disappear anymore. In conversations, I stopped rehearsing answers in my head before speaking. Sometimes I just said what I thought and nobody laughed. Nobody corrected me. Nobody told me to be quiet. And to be honest, that was shocking. Friendships started changing. I stopped over-explaining myself. I stopped apologizing for having opinions. I stopped chasing people who treated me like a convenience. Some friendships faded when I stopped overgiving, and that hurt. But it also told me the truth. If someone only stays when you're useful, they were never really your friend. I started caring about how I looked. Not for validation, but because I liked how I felt when I dressed nicely. I tried brighter colors. I wore earrings without feeling like I was calling attention to myself. I started walking with my shoulders back instead of slightly folded inward. People started saying things like, "Wow, you've changed, you're glowing." They didn't know that glow was from therapy sessions, highlighted books, whispered prayers, and conversations that scared me. Spiritually, something was really different. God stopped feeling like a distant authority figure and started feeling like someone who actually liked me. I would sit on my bed, play soft music, and talk to him about my day, the way Ifunanya talked to her mom. I told him when I felt small, when I felt proud, when I felt confused. And slowly, I stopped feeling like love had to be earned. Therapy was uncomfortable and freeing at the same time. I learned words for feelings I had buried: abandonment, neglect, hyper-independence, people-pleasing. Seeing my patterns written out in clinical language was both validating and terrifying. It wasn't just about personality, it was programming, and programming can be rewritten. One day, I caught myself laughing loudly in the office, like really laughing, and I froze for a second. I didn't recognize that sound. It was mine, but softer, freer, and unfiltered. I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was slowly becoming someone I actually liked. Healing for me wasn't just about happiness, but sometimes I grieved for the girl I could have been. The child who could have been loud without being scolded. The teenager who could have been confident without proving herself. And the young woman who didn't have to unlearn fear. There was anger too, but also understanding. My parents didn't have the tools. They gave what they had. It just wasn't what I needed. The city skyline looked different from my apartment window. I had spent years watching streets, people, cars, and lives go by, and finally, I was no longer just observing. I was now a part of it. I had a good job now, one I worked hard to earn, but success didn't define me. My worth no longer came from accolades or grades or validation from others. I learned to see myself. I still remember the first time I realized it. A friend at work complimented my presentation. I felt a flicker of pride. But not the old anxiety where I worried if they were just being polite. It was genuine. I smiled and I knew I was allowed to feel good about myself without performing. Friendships weren't different too. I chose who I spent my time with. I didn't chase approval anymore. I did not over-explain. I laughed freely, shared stories, let people in, and some stayed, some left, but I didn't cling anymore. I did not need everybody to like me to feel worthy. Romantically, I was learning boundaries. For the first time, I recognized emotional availability in others and in myself. I stopped trying to fix someone else's heart while mine was still mending. I started noticing red flags before they became heartbreak. And when I did make mistakes, I forgave myself instead of punishing myself like I used to. Spiritually, I had a safe space. I could pray honestly, no filters, no rehearsed words. Sometimes tears came, sometimes laughter. I discovered that love could be quiet, consistent, and nurturing. The kind of love I never got as a child, but could now give to myself. So guys, listening to this story, I would like us as parents to learn a few things from here. So for parents, you need to be emotionally available for your children, because we can see from this story that it's a ripple effect. It haunts these people, these children, once they are grown, it haunts them in their adulthood. And the process of healing is longer than the process of how they even got to the trauma in the first place. And so make it a point of duty to always ask, how are you feeling today? As often as you can. As often as you ask, did you eat, to your children. Sit with them. Don't just feed them or supervise their homework. Listen to them. Really listen to the stories they have to tell you. Validate their feelings. You can tell them that it's okay to be sad or angry or scared, but don't shut them down. Show affection consistently, not just when achievements are involved. Let them know that you genuinely care about them. And for those of us who grew up without emotional presence, I'm here to tell you that you can heal. You can start by noticing patterns you inherited. You can allow yourself to feel without guilt. You can allow yourself to cry, have your tears, your frustration, your joy. They are all yours. Yes, recognize them, but don't dwell on them. Seek safe friendships that model trust and care. Professional support is also advised, such as therapy, mentoring, pastoral counseling. These can give you vocabulary to experiences you've long carried silently. Trust me. And lastly, give yourself grace. Self-love isn't being selfish. Even the Bible says you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you keep depriving yourself of receiving love, how do you expect to give it to your neighbor? I think about that little girl in Chiamaka's story, the one who got everything right and still felt unseen. With the way Chiamaka turned out, she will be proud of the woman that she is. Someone who can laugh, cry, work, love, and rest without needing consent or constant approval. I'm her advocate now. I'm her witness. I'm her parent. And slowly, I have learned that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. And so, my dear listeners, you've been listening to Unscathed by your favorite host, Edifin. Take care of your heart, show up for yourself, and let's do this again next week. Okay? If you would love to give feedback on this podcast and you're listening to it on Spotify, kindly send me an email at eydefin@outlook.com. But if you find the video on YouTube, you can simply drop your comments on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and share this to your friends as well. See you next week.